Have you ever imagined a love so profound that it defied the laws of nature, faith, and even death? We're not talking about a simple romance, but a connection so powerful that it transcends the sacred and the profane, the human and the supernatural. Today, we're diving into a story written with the intensity of an eternal vow, where a young priest, caught between devotion and desire, finds himself face to face with a vampire of noble lineage, a creature who embodies both seduction and damnation. In this video, we'll explore the mysteries of Clarimonde, a fascinating story that redefined the concept of love and sacrifice in vampire literature. You will uncover the dilemmas of a man torn between flesh and spirit, light and darkness, and how a single glance can seal the fate of a soul forever. If you've ever found yourself pondering the limits of love, get ready for a unique reward. A story that will challenge your beliefs, sharpen your senses, and perhaps make you question what is real and what is a dream. Stay with us and discover how this forbidden passion redefined what it means to live or die for love. Romuald was a young man of pure soul, whose life seemed predetermined from birth. Raised to serve God, he grew up surrounded by vows of devotion and promises of a life marked by sacrifice and virtue. Yet, even in his stillness, there was something in his heart he never dared to acknowledge. A latent desire, a restlessness that made him silently question whether faith could truly fill every corner of his soul. On the night before his final vows, he was overtaken by a vivid dream, where a woman of inhuman beauty appeared. He awoke drenched in sweat, the image seared into his mind, unaware that his destiny had been sealed. The following day, while walking through the streets, Romuald saw her. She was there, as real as the air he breathed, cloaked in a velvet mantle the color of twilight itself. Her eyes, deep and hypnotic, pierced through him like a blade. He knew, the moment their eyes met, that he had never encountered anything so beautiful and, at the same time, so dangerous. She was Clarimonde, and in that fleeting encounter, he felt the world spin backward. She whispered his name, as if she had known him for centuries, and with an enigmatic smile, disappeared into the crowd. Romuald tried to forget. He immersed himself in the rituals of the church, seeking refuge in prayer and the company of his brothers. But each time he closed his eyes, Clarimonde's image invaded him. It was a sweet torment, a memory he couldn't erase, like a lingering perfume long after its owner had left. He began to wonder if this was a test of his faith or a temptation he was meant to resist. Yet, the pull was irresistible, and he found himself longing for that encounter again, even knowing it might lead to his downfall. Clarimonde was more than just a woman. She was a calling to freedom, passion, and something he couldn't name, but that filled an emptiness he hadn't even realized was there. Romuald didn't know it yet, but by crossing her path, he had been marked by something far beyond his comprehension. He was caught in a web of destiny woven by forces he couldn't control, and his heart, once devoted to faith, now began to beat for a desire that felt as wrong as it was inevitable. Romuald's journey was only beginning, and nothing would ever be the same again. From the moment Clarimonde entered his life, Romuald felt his soul split in two. On one side, the faith that had been his guide, a quiet flame he had always believed unshakable. On the other, desire, a voracious fire that grew with every thought he dedicated to that woman. He sought solace in prayer, but every word spoken to God seemed to lose strength before the memory of that hypnotizing smile. For the first time, he began to question, could a man of faith be so easily consumed by earthly desire? Or was this a greater trial, a divine game whose purpose he could not comprehend? Clarimonde was not a constant presence, but her absence was even more devastating. With each passing day without seeing her, Romuald felt his resolve weaken. He punished himself, believing that temptation was his weakness, but the truth ran deeper. There was something in her essence that transcended the flesh, something that seemed to call directly to his soul. When she finally appeared again, he was lost. Even aware of the danger, he could not resist her approach. She touched him softly, and in that touch, he felt a paradox. A cold that burned, a damnation that offered ecstasy. The church, which had once been a place of refuge, became a prison for Romuald. Every sermon he delivered felt hollow. Every prayer seemed pointless. The gazes of his superiors, which had once brought him pride, now weighed on him like a silent accusation. He feared that his doubt was etched on his skin, that everyone could see the battle raging within him. Clarimonde, in contrast, was a mystery without weight or guilt, a creature who embraced her nature without hesitation. She was not just a temptation. She was an alternative to the world of repression and renunciation he knew. Romuald knew he was at a crossroads. He could return to the path he knew, abandon Clarimonde, and rededicate his life to faith. But the idea of living without her was like living without light, without color, without sound. He wondered, what is the point of a life dedicated to salvation if it has no joy? On the other hand, surrendering to Clarimonde was to embrace perdition, to renounce the promise of redemption he had sworn to follow. It was an impossible choice, but he knew he could not avoid it. Time was running out, and with each passing moment, he was being drawn deeper into the abyss. Clarimonde was a vision that defied the conventions of both the human and the divine. Her transcendent beauty could not be described in mundane terms. It seemed as though it had been shaped by the gods themselves, a perfect balance between the celestial and the profane. Her skin was luminous, almost ethereal, and her eyes, deep and inscrutable, carried the weight of ages lived and secrets never revealed. Clarimonde did not move like a mortal. Every gesture was a silent invitation, every smile a veiled promise. She was an embodied mystery, and to Romuald, she represented everything he had never dared to desire. It was not just her beauty that made Clarimonde irresistible, but the magnetism of her presence. When she spoke, her voice was like a melody that seemed to touch the deepest strings of Romuald's soul. She was at once tender and dangerous, a duality that only heightened her allure. In her words, there was an ancient wisdom, as if she had seen the world unravel and be reborn countless times. Yet, there was also a touch of sadness, an echo of loneliness that made Clarimonde an even more captivating figure. She was the embodiment of desire, but also of lament. Clarimonde was not just a woman. She was a symbol. To Romuald, she represented everything he had renounced. Freedom, passion, guiltless pleasure. She was an invitation to a life where the rules of the mortal world did not apply. Yet, there was a price. Beneath her enchanting facade, Clarimonde was a creature of darkness, a being who lived off the blood of others to sustain her own eternity. But far from repelling Romuald, this fact only drew him closer. He felt that by accepting her, he would not only break with his faith, but also embrace a new kind of truth. It was impossible to define Clarimonde in simple words. She was both a seductress and a victim of her own nature, a creature who exuded power, but also bore the weight of her immortality. Romuald saw in her a freedom he had never known, but also a prison of eternity he could scarcely comprehend. Even so, he could not resist. With each encounter, each exchange of glances, he felt himself being drawn into an abyss. But what a sweet and irresistible abyss it was, to love someone who personified the very mystery of existence. The life of Romuald became an unsettling oscillation between two worlds, one of light and obedience, and another of shadows and passion. During the day, he donned his cassock, devoted himself to sacred rituals, and sought solace in prayer. But at night, it was as if a veil was lifted, and he found himself alongside Clarimonde, living an existence full of luxury and decadence. He could not be certain where reality ended and the dream began, but the fascination those nights held for him was undeniable. The memories were too vivid to be mere delusions, yet too dangerous to be real. In moments of solitude, Romuald began to doubt his own sanity. He remembered sumptuous feasts, smiles shrouded in mystery, and touches that set his skin ablaze. Yet at dawn, everything vanished, leaving behind only the simplicity of his cell and the neatly folded cassock. Was it a trick of his mind, a divine punishment for his temptations, or did Clarimonde truly take him to a parallel universe where time seemed to cease? He had no answers, but he knew that each night left a deeper mark on him than the one before. Clarimonde, with her enigmatic smile, never offered any clarity. She simply received him as if he were her eternal lover, belonging to that world as much as she did. It was impossible for Romuald not to feel like part of that universe of splendor and pleasure, even though it stood against everything he believed in. But he also knew that each night spent by her side pulled him further away from his former self, from the faith that once defined him. The duality consumed him, but he began to realize that the choice between the two worlds might never be his to make. Perhaps it was Clarimonde who dictated the rules of this game. Gradually, Romuald began to wonder, what if the life he lived during the day was the true illusion? What was more real? The prayers whispered into the void or Clarimonde's burning touch? The doubt grew like a shadow within him, and he felt he was losing control over his own existence. Yet amid the confusion, there was one certainty. Whether it was dream or reality, the world beside Clarimonde was where he felt most alive. However, living in two worlds came with a price, and the chasm between them seemed to deepen with each choice left unmade. The conclusion came in the dead of night, when Romuald, gripped by a desperate courage, decided to confront the fate that tormented him. He knew that Clarimonde was both his salvation and his damnation, but he also knew he could no longer live torn between faith and passion. Guided by prayer and despair, he prepared a wooden stake, a simple instrument, yet laden with symbolism. With a heavy heart, he went to meet Clarimonde, not as a lover, but as a judge and executioner. Still, every step that brought him closer to her was marked by tears, for he knew he was not just destroying a monster, but also the love that consumed him. Clarimonde received him with the serenity of someone who knew the moment was inevitable. She looked at him, not with anger or fear, but with an expression that mingled pain and acceptance. Romuald hesitated, his hands trembling as he held the stake. "I love you," she whispered, her voice as soft as a lament, and those words pierced his soul more deeply than any weapon ever could. He knew she was surrendering, not just to death but to him, in an act of love as desperate as it was eternal. Yet, Romuald also knew that if he did not act, she would destroy him, and his soul would be lost forever. With one last look of pain and resolve, Romuald summoned all the strength of his faith and drove the stake into Clarimonde's heart. The scream she let out echoed like a sad song, a sound that seemed to contain all human emotions: love, loss, regret, and ultimately liberation. He held her as the life drained from her, watching her eyes lose their hypnotic gleam and her skin its supernatural glow. When it was over, he laid her down gently, as if she were still his lover, and murmured a prayer for her soul. hoping she would find the peace he could never give her in life. The act of killing Clarimonde was a bitter victory, a redemption that brought more pain than relief. Romuald returned to the church, but not as the same man. He carried with him the memory of that night, the weight of his love and the pain of his choice. Every time he held the crucifix in his hands, he felt Clarimonde's absence as an open wound. Yet he also knew that by destroying her, he had saved something greater, his soul. Clarimonde's death was not just the end of a vampire, but the closure of a passion that defied both heaven and darkness, a memory that would never leave him.